It's Tuesday, the 7th of October. I'm Alec Hogg, and here is your BizNews Briefing. Stories we're covering for you today: the crime war in the South African police services. Neal Froneman, the chief executive of Ex-Sibanye Stillwater, as up until the beginning of last week, a week ago, he stepped down. He's worried about crime. 361 has thrown out the BEE elite enrichment playbook. Sy Jacobs of 361, I had to ask him this, shares with us his views on where the JSE is going, given that he's done so well of late. And then we'll also have a couple of stories actually, on the gold price heading for $4,000 an ounce, Afrimat, ISP, Isotopes, and Jane Goodall. But let's kick off on the political front, and indeed with the big story of the moment that's got everybody in a little bit of a tiz. So there's a guy called Kenny Kunene, and he is the deputy chairman of the Patriotic Alliance. Patriotic Alliance is quite an important partner of the ANC, and its leader, Gayton McKenzie, a very charismatic and well-known member of the Government of National Unity. Well, he threatened to leave the GNU unless Kenny Kunene, who was found or identified as having been at the home of an accused in a murder, unless Kenny Kunene was reinstated as the MMC for transport in the Johannesburg City Council, where the PA is part of the alliance. Well, it's happened. So Ramaphosa intervened. Kunene is now reappointed, and well, not surprisingly, with his trademark dark glasses and trademark smile as well, he's very happy to be back in that position. The Patriotic Alliance, from their point of view, is not going to be leaving the GNU as a result. This whole crime turf war, which is being played out in the Madlanga Commission, appears to be treating the symptoms rather than the cause, or at least that's the view of T.P. Smith, who has been for 25 years the man driving the attack on crime in the metro of Cape Town, and he was involved in the DA's podcast this week, where he expressed some pretty forthright opinions on how the cause could be addressed rather than, as at the moment, just the symptom.
I sometimes think the ANC think devolution is spelled D-E-V-I-L. They seem to have a completely unnatural fear of devolution. But I think it's also confusing for many people. So at the moment, what we're talking about is not controlling SAPs. Although I think we're probably at the point where a very coherent and rational argument can be made for moving control of SAPs from national government to provincial or local government. Ian is correct when he says at the hands of the ANC nationally, they have destroyed our police force and are continuing to do harm to it every month. So what we are talking about consistently, and have for the past 12, 13 years written to national ministers about, through the city, through the provincial government, through the Institute for Municipal Public Safety, through SALGA, through a whole variety of channels, is the expansion of powers. We got this right in 2018 with a limited expansion of powers for our municipal police officers, and immediately started talking about more because the critical powers did not expand. And in regards to our Metro Police, for instance, we can engage in crime prevention. So the city's core constitutional competency, what does the law say we must do? What are we responsible for? Traffic enforcement and bylaw enforcement. That's our core competency. When we stop doing that, nobody else does it. If we do not do crime prevention, it's still SAPS's job. That's their core competency. They are supposed to do crime prevention, detect the crime, investigate it, work with the NPA for somebody to be charged, and then a conviction must happen. But that process now is a deeply flawed process. And the flaws affect people on the street. if I can give you a practical example before I answer the rest of your question, in Bonteheuwel, we had the death of a small baby. There were two men involved in that murder. One of those men had a firearms conviction, two firearm conviction arrests in 2016, I think, in 2019, or around about there, twice. And twice the state failed to make a competent or effective case, and twice that offender was able to go free.
Well, I'll be at the Joburg Mining Indaba from tomorrow, as will Peter Major, our mining web columnist, and indeed, I expect Neal Froneman to be there as well. He left Sibanye-Stillwater last week after 12 years as its chief executive. But an area where Froneman is still making a big impact is with Business for South Africa and the crime and corruption channel where he is the champion. He spoke to Bronwyn Nielsen a little while ago about his concerns on what he's seeing in the criminal situation in South Africa, not surprisingly, given that turf war that is now going on in SAPS.
I am, for the first time, very worried about South Africa. Look, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think the GNU is a very important part of what I'm going to say. And the GNU, in my mind, creates light at the end of the tunnel. But I don't want anyone listening to this thinking that I'm saying it's all good and rosy. It's not. There's a huge amount of work to do. But the fact that we now seem to have more of a balance in government, but it's not a constructive balance. Don't get me wrong. But at least we have political parties, and in particular the DA, digging in its heels and saying no. Now I know the president feels that is negative. It's not negative. That is exactly how a coalition works. They cannot always agree, especially when there are proposals to do the wrong things. And you know, all credit to those political parties that see their role as doing the right things. And you know, that's how we run companies. The most difficult decisions are the ones that are normally about doing the right things, and they're not popular decisions. And that's where government, in my view, thinks that friendly relationships are good relationships. They're not. Credible relationships are one where you respect and you involve your counterparties in the right way. So I think my view is the ANC is in desperate trouble. There's a lack of delivery, and listen, it's very bad to generalize, and I will come back to that shortly. But you know, there's at local government level, there's, you know, and we can talk about Johannesburg. There's a complete mess, to be honest. People are running these municipalities that are not competent. How they get there, you know, defies logic. And it takes good people and hard work to run these type of organizations and deliver to the people that you represent as a civil servant. What I want to say is that, you know, we engage with government at the highest levels and at levels below, let's call it political leadership. And I liken it to a company. You know, we've bought companies that have failed, and quite honestly, you know, we are talking about a failure of state here. And those companies are comprised of good people but bad leadership. So when we talk of government, there are lots of good people within government working hard, just as despondent about crime and corruption as you and I are. And therefore, we got to be careful when we generalize. We got to blame leadership. This is not, bad companies. You change leadership and you put in good leadership, and the same company then works well.
Well, big story of the day in the investment world is undoubtedly the decision by 361, one of the best performing and most highly regarded money managers in the country, to do a BEE transaction, but not using the usual suspects and the black economic enrichment, as it's being called in some quarters. They're going instead for a deal with the Maharishi Institute. You might know them as CEDA, a free access university that has already put through something like 25,000 graduates under the tutelage of Dr. Taddy Blatcher and his team. Maharishi being a guru of meditation, and meditation being a big part of what the students are taught at this university, which, by the way, now inhabits the old 44 Main Street. And if you've been around the block a few times, you'll know that that was the mighty Anglo-Americans' headquarters in downtown Johannesburg. I spoke to Cy Jacobs yesterday to ask him for a little bit of background on why they'd gone this route, selling 22% of their equity to an educational institute rather than the easier way of the usual suspects.
We've been considering BE deals for, ever since the legislation came about. And we've looked at many, many deals over the last number of years. Like many of your people in your community, we weren't happy with doing a BE deal that enriched a certain number of people or party. We wanted to do something that was really consistent with our ethos around South Africa and giving back. And we thought this initiative, specifically focused around tertiary education and educating the masses, was a really good initiative. And I'd known Taddy Blatcher for many, many years. He's someone that's not financially motivated. He has got various international awards for some of his acclaimed work in what he has done over the years. And we thought this was a great opportunity to give back, and at the same time, obviously help sort out our BE rating. It will improve our credibility. We weren't under really any pressure to do anything, but we just felt that this was the right deal to do, for us at this stage of 361.
But many people who are looking at BE as a have to do would not go beyond, well, we got to get some black guys, and usually it's the usual suspects, and bring them in. What got you thinking that you could have something different to what the mainstream are focusing on?
Well, I think the whole idea of the BE codes in our mind was if you're going to, further South African people who were just previously disadvantaged and further something in their lives. And we had to do the kind of deal that genuinely was going to go to people and not to your usual suspects. So we were very specific on that, and we wanted a deal that didn't enrich anybody, but gave to genuine benefits. And that's why we created this educational trust with Maharishi Group. We invite everybody to go out and actually see the campus in the CBD of Johannesburg. It's quite something, and just see the amount of students that are enlisted there, the amount of people that have gone into subsequent jobs, creating their own incomes for themselves and their families. It really is extraordinary, and it is very widespread.
Well, having Cy in our studio gave me an opportunity that I wasn't going to miss to get some insights from this very astute money manager into the way that he sees the investment markets going ahead, particularly as he's been a bull on South Africa for well over a year and has topped the performance tables as a consequence. Let's lean in.
The big thing here is we've actually had a phenomenal run in precious metals, obviously both gold and PGMs as a late catch-up. Obviously, we're the largest producers of PGMs in the world. We're not that big in gold anymore, but it has done substantially well for our market, given the fact that the components of those two have risen from a few percentage points a couple of years ago to now 25% of our caps WIX and almost a third of the MSCI Emerging Markets South Africa Index. So it's had big tailwinds for the South African equity market.
And have you guys at 361 been invested there in that?
Yeah, we have, obviously. It depends on which funds, but obviously in our benchmark cognizant funds, like our SA equity funds, which is the large majority of assets we manage, we've had pretty big weightings there. So we've had a very good year, and we've enjoyed the rise of the precious metals.
Now, it's lovely looking back, but everybody wants to look ahead. Right now, how are you positioned for the next 12 months?
So I think we've been slightly reducing our position in precious metals. I think South African Inc. itself, banks, insurers, real estate, etc., really standing out on the cheaper side and got cheaper. And I think a lot of that has been passive flow linked as well. So we've seen a lot of money moving out of domestics and having to chase the index reweightings in precious metals, both from international investors and South African investors. And as a result, I think the sector has been neglected, especially SA Inc. And we've seen, dividend yields 2 weeks ago in the bank, some of them, reaching north of 10% with growth. So I think they're very cheap. We've been rotating a little bit back into SA Inc. and we feel that the gap is too wide, but it will obviously need some kind of global factors to work in our favor. I mean, maybe the resolution in Gaza, together with potential resolution in Russia, Ukraine, in our view, could lead to a slightly weaker gold price. So, but at the moment, everybody's using gold as a hedge against the US dollar. Things are a little bit erratic politically there. And I think there's a lot of safety in the world in gold. So, for now, we think both are okay, but we've seen a nice pickup in the last week, at least in the SA Inc. side of the South African market.
Like a soapy breakup scene, selling your car can be an emotional experience.
Just how dramatic was the car selling experience?
Not dramatic at all. I did my research and WeBuyCars was by far the best price.
Very not dramatic. But I like drama.
I was standing there watching my phone, waiting for the money to get in, and there it was.
Yes. Car, driving.
WeBuyCars, the easiest way to sell your car, by far.
I wouldn't mind a little more drama. Anybody bring me some tears?
The gold price has been in the news a lot lately, not surprisingly, given its surge to $4,000 or close to $4,000 an ounce. This morning, Bloomberg got a couple of experts to give their insights and thoughts of the reason for the increase in bullion and indeed where it might be heading.
It's interesting looking at where this rally started. Initially, yes, it was central bank flows. It was a lot of demand from China that was helping to propel prices higher. But that baton has now been passed on to the investor space. And we're seeing ETFs now climbing at an accelerated pace that we haven't seen since 2020. And those ETFs, it's not just the longer term buyers that we've seen in the past. We're now seeing an increasing number of family offices coming into the space. And all of that has been increased by appetites because we've seen concerns around Fed independence or whether tariff legality or whether it's concerns about US debt growing or even concerns about further monetary easing. All of these have helped to propel a lot of interest in gold and has certainly helped to boost that safe haven appetite.
Sabrin, your thoughts on the rally we've seen so far? Less of speculative trades, more to do with structural changes long term?
So gold thrives on uncertainty. Gold is a safe haven asset. It has always been. So the rally kind of started in October 2023. So this is already pretty much a long-standing, long-term rally that we've seen here for almost 2 years now. So most of the drivers of the gold rally so far has been geopolitical uncertainty. So the Russia-Ukraine ceasefire talks, they remain pretty much elusive. The Hamas deal with Israel is going on. There's a lot of uncertainty around there. There's also a lot of uncertainty between Israel and Iran. Although we do have a ceasefire, it's fragile. So U.S. policy uncertainty is also adding to the fuel. So there is a lot of geopolitical uncertainty that is boosting gold. But at the same time, the U.S. Fed rate cut that the entire market expects at this rate in October is certainly driving prices higher, as gold is a non-yielding asset as well.
Not surprisingly, the $4,000 target for the gold price was under discussion in the Mining Web weekly conversation that I have with Peter Major, and I'm pretty sure it's also going to be very much in focus at the Joburg Mining Indaba, where, by the way, we'll have Anglo-American CEO Duncan Wanblad, a man who's been very much in the global headlines lately. He'll be in attendance, and so will Gwedi Mantashe, representing the South African government. He is the Minister of Mining, along with pretty much everybody who's anybody in the mining industry in South Africa. I'm looking forward to the next couple of days and sharing that information with you. But in our conversation, I asked Peter what he thought about $4,000 an ounce gold and whether he anticipated that it would happen soon.
I think I'm going to reserve that call until they've broken 4,000, and I want to see how fast they break 4,000 and what happens right after. Does it just spike through 4 and then continue? If it continues to even 4,100, I would say that people have 5,000 in their mind. If it just goes over 4 and comes back under, I'd start holding my breath. As we said before in this program, Alec, gold had been, stuck at around 3,300 an ounce. April, May, June, July, August, and I thought, okay, that's its ceiling. There seems to be real strong buying every time it dips below there, but it's prudent buying because nobody wants to push it to 34. But since we've seen it break 34, look how quick it went, 35, 36, 37, 38. So, yeah, I'm not buying here, but I would, if I had to make a bet, I'd bet it's going to break 4, that it's not going to break 4. Yeah, so I will bet on that, but I'm too scared, too reluctant, too stubborn to buy more gold here.
Onto the news from the Stock Exchange News Service now. And one of our favorites in the BizNews portfolio, Afrimat, was, giving some good news for a change. Afrimat's been under a lot of pressure due to, for the most part, incidents beyond their control. But today they came out with a trading statement, and that is for the 6 months to the end of August. And headline earnings per share are projected to rise by between 90 and 95% to between 100 and 103 cents. That's for the 6 months to the end of August. Really good news for shareholders who've been looking for good news here. And the part that jumped out at me was the improvement in bulk commodities driven by local iron ore sales, where the volumes have more than doubled. That tells you that Transnet is getting its act together. Also, in iron ore, export volumes have also increased, and that tells you that not only is the rail part of Transnet starting to work better, but so too the ports. Now, we've been hearing feedback on this, positive feedback on this, but you don't really want to believe it until you see it in the actual numbers, and here they are today from Afrimat. A controversial business called ASP Isotopes is perhaps a little more controversial still after the news that came out late last night that the founder, chairman, and CEO, Paul Mann, who has been interviewed on BizNews TV previously and I think he's a Cambridge graduate. He certainly did go to an Oxbridge institution. He was also working on Wall Street. He's a chemical engineer. He liked the look of ASP Isotopes, which was a company in bankruptcy, and pulled it out and has now turned it around and seen the share price on that company on NASDAQ rising 200% in the past year, from $3 to $9. The shares are listed on the JSE. They opened at an artificially high price of 475 Rand, and they now trade around 158 Rand. But the bad news that's coming out of ASB Isotopes is that Paul Mann, the man who's been driving the whole story, has now relinquished his CEO duties and has become executive chairman, where he will provide oversight, apparently. Reason given is for health reasons. He's a relatively young man, so we hope that he regains his health soon. The company will now be driven by Robert Ainscough, who is the brother of Donald Ainscough, who joined the company as executive vice president and general counsel in August 2025. Well, before we go, something very close to my heart is the story of Jane Goodall. I served on the Goodall Foundation here in South Africa for a period of time, and she passed away in the past week. Here is an interview which tells a bit more about Goodall with Bloomberg.
Most of your life you devoted to the study of chimpanzees to make sure that they're better understood and better appreciated. But in recent years, you created an institute, the Jane Goodall Institute. And what is that designed to do?
Well, that was started in 1977 when by then I had a little research station and 4 of my students were kidnapped and everything shut down. And so some friends of mine said, well, let's start an institute so that this research can carry on. Bless them. So that was 1977, and it was set up to study, conserve chimpanzees and other animals and educate. And it's developed since then. So it's, we've got 27 Jane Goodall Institutes around the world. And then I realized at some point that the African people living in and around chimpanzee habitats right across Africa were struggling to survive. There was crippling poverty, lack of health and education, moving deeper into the forest, being exposed to diseases like Ebola and HIV from the chimpanzees and vice versa. And it hit me. If we don't help these people to find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, conservation won't work.
That's your briefing for today. Bronwyn will be back again tomorrow. Until then, cheerio.